Yo, and welcome along to my latest video. Today has us venturing to Malvern, just a little south of the city of Worcester. A place I've visited numerous times over the years, mainly for the walks and the views. Now, over the last few months, I've been working on a project on the area with my mate Dan, which we do hope to start releasing in due course. But until then, I just want to show you an awesome place with some pretty awesome features. And also along the way, we'll discuss a bit of the history on the place in question and see if it makes much sense. So the place I'm showing you today is the Great Malvern Priory. Now, as you can see from the pictures, it's a pretty awesome place and quite a big place as well, which just doesn't make no sense when we look at the narrative shortly. Now, it did start out as a monastery for almost 500 years at the beginning of the last millennium. Now, in 1860, major restoration was undertaken by somebody of the name Sir George Gilbert Scott, who we'll actually have a look at shortly. Now, this time frame also seems to be when a lot of other churches in the area started popping up, although I argue some are in fact a lot older for whatever purpose they were originally intended for. Now, a quick look at the population charts, and you can see that at the time of the restoration, only around 11,000 people lived in Malvern. Now, if we take that back 60 years, you can see it's less than 4,000 in population, which has me wondering, what was the need for such a massive structure before or even during this population growth? I mean, cities to this day still don't have anything half as majestic as this. As I mentioned, this place had a restoration in the 1860s by Sir George Gilbert Scott. So let's have a little look at his story, shall we? Now, as you can read pretty much straight away, this guy has over 800 buildings attributed to him. His first works was in 1833, so he would have been in his early 20s. Now, he died at the age of 66, so he had a little over 40 years of his life of being an architect. And I'm also just noticing he died on my birthday, albeit just over 100 years earlier. Now, feel free to pause and read the information if you want, but I just want to draw your attention to the list of the buildings supposedly designed by this guy. Now, you must agree with me, it's some sort of feat managing to play a part in so many historical buildings, especially when you see some of the buildings, and that includes this magnificent Malvern Priory. And the list just goes on and on. So you've seen what this one architect can do over 100 years ago. So let's just take a quick look at some famous modern day architects. Now, all I did was search famous modern day architects and clicked on the first link, which just so happened to be the top 50. So I picked the first two on the list just to compare their feats and accolades to George. Now, first off, we have Alvaro Siza, aged 89, so already has an extra 20 years on George. Now, let's look at what he's done in his past lifetime. As you can see, not a fat lot at all, and the things he has done are an eyesore in comparison. Now it's amazing to think some guy all those years ago managed to design so many beautiful buildings, and then Alvaro comes along. Now let's have a look at another day modern architect. This guy, Antoine Prelock, a couple of years younger than Alvaro, but just like Alvaro, has over 20 years longer than good old George. So let's see what he's been involved in. Now as you can see, quite a decent list compared to Alvaro, although from the images his buildings were just as ugly. And then it stops. Quite a number away from George's accolades, you must admit. So it really makes me wonder if all these architects like George, and there's plenty of them if you look, and I've even briefly shown a couple in my past videos. So yeah, it makes me wonder if these guys actually had anything to do with building these, or if, simply put, the narrative needed someone that they could pin these things to. I mean, why do modern day architects fail in comparison, considering our vast knowledge and materials? So anyway, let's move on to a couple of awesome things in the actual priory itself. Now firstly, I'll quickly show you the stained glass window, which is said to be the largest display of 15th century stained glass in England. Now the first picture is the main one, and the second picture is the window at the back of the church. And yeah, that's pretty fascinating if the narrative is right. Now to these, known as misericords or mercy seats, also from the 15th century. Now these are said to be carved from one big piece of oak. Just think about that for a second. Carved from one piece of oak over 500 years ago. Another crazy bit of engineering when you think about it. So take a look at each one and the description of each, and pause it if you need to. I mean, what fascinates me even more than the date and the way that these are said to have been made are the carvings themselves. Each seat has a different carving, and some looking weird as Again, it's just further proof to me that our ancestors, many hundreds of years ago, were a lot more advanced than we are led to believe. And the narrative on these places is nothing but BS. I mean, look at these carvings and ask yourself why. Why some of them are even here, and what's the reason for it? I mean, some of them look absolutely crazy. And think of the time and the effort that went into something like this as well. And ask yourself why a place like this has such a huge priory, or whatever the building actually was. Then have a think about where you live. Have a look at all the old buildings and question it. Something just doesn't add up with the timeline and the narrative that we are fed. So I think it's about time we all start asking questions, coming together and finding the truth one way or the other. Now, as for Kinver, it's definitely going to be the weekend of the 8th and the 9th of July. And those that are coming along, please get in touch so I can give you all the relevant details, as I won't be putting any of the details on here. I've been Nicky B, and until next time.